Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into some interesting territory today.
Yeah.
It's something that I think a lot of people have probably experienced, but
Yeah.
it's not something you hear talked about very often.
Right.
And that's the whole idea of getting over someone you never actually dated.
Mm.
Like there's real heartache there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, so many people experience it, but we don't really talk about it that much.
No.
And it often gets met with that dismissive, but you weren't even together.
Right.
Yeah. And yet the emotions involved are very real.
Mhm.
And, this is something that Ansar Mahmoud really explores beautifully in his book, The Love That Never Happened, A Guide to Healing from Imaginary Relationships.
Okay.
That's what we're looking at today.
Awesome. So our deep dive today is all about understanding this kind of uncharted emotional territory, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you feeling and how can we give you some actual tools to move forward from this? Because when you think about it, letting go of that what if, of that potential,
Right.
can be so much more complicated sometimes than an actual breakup.
It's true.
Because there's no real closure.
Right. There's no defined ending.
Yeah, there's no like mutual acknowledgement that it's over.
Yeah, you're not getting that validation from the other person.
Right.
And that makes it tough.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
one of the things that's so fascinating to me is how powerful that potential of the relationship is.
Yeah.
Even though there's no actual shared history
Right.
or commitment there.
Yeah. It's all about the possibility, the what could be.
Yeah. And so we want to explore why those feelings develop in the first place
Right.
and what are the psychological patterns that are happening there.
Yeah.
And then what can you actually do about it?
Exactly. Give people some concrete steps
Yeah.
to navigate all of this.
So we're going to start with the feelings themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
Why those are so valid.
Yeah.
And then we'll look at this space between the fantasy and the reality.
The fantasy versus reality trap.
Yes.
Love that.
And then we'll look at those thought patterns that keep us feeling stuck.
Yes, those can be so insidious.
Yeah.
The rumination.
Yeah, and how to create distance,
Yes, essential.
which is so hard.
It is, but so important.
Yeah, and then challenging the assumptions that we might be making,
Absolutely.
reconnecting with ourselves.
Love that. Self-rediscovery.
Yes,
It's a journey.
and all the different forms of love.
Right, because it's not all about romantic love.
Exactly. And then ultimately how to reclaim your happiness.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm ready. Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with those initial feelings.
Okay.
Why are they so valid?
Yeah.
There's that real feeling of invalidation,
Absolutely.
especially when you hear, but you weren't even a couple.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Right. It's like, ouch.
It's like a punch to the gut.
Yeah.
Because it makes you feel like you're not allowed to feel what you're feeling.
Right.
But the truth is, your emotions are totally legitimate, whether there was a label on the relationship or not.
Yeah, it's like we have a script for breakups, right?
Right.
You have the breakup playlists and the friends rallying around you.
The ice cream, the rom-coms.
Yes, and you slowly move on, but when there's not even a relationship to point to,
Right.
it's like, are you even allowed to feel these things?
It's like you're making it up, like you're
Mhm.
being dramatic.
Yeah.
But Mahmoud is very clear in the book
Yeah.
that there are real psychological reasons why this hurts so much.
Okay, so what is going on there?
Well, first of all, think about the emotional energy that you've invested.
Right.
Even if it was one-sided, you were still putting in time,
Right.
thinking about this person, maybe daydreaming about a future together.
Yeah,
And that investment, even if it wasn't reciprocated, it still matters.
it does.
So when it doesn't work out, there is a sense of loss.
Like the sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly. It's like you've already put so much in, it's hard to just walk away.
Yeah, and then there's that whole brain chemistry thing.
Oh yeah, the dopamine hit.
Right, like even those small interactions.
Yeah, like a quick chat or a shared joke.
Right, a smile across the room.
Exactly.
Those can release dopamine, and your brain starts associating that person with pleasure.
Right, with good feelings.
So when the possibility of the relationship is gone, it's like that source of good feelings is gone too.
It's like you've lost your dealer,
Right.
your dopamine dealer.
Yeah, and then of course you can't forget the what if factor.
Oh, the what ifs. They'll get you every time.
Because sometimes that perfect potential relationship,
Yeah,
the one that only lives in your head,
exactly.
is so much more appealing than what would actually happen if you got together.
Right, because real relationships are messy.
Yeah,
They're complicated. There are compromises.
right.
But the fantasy, that's perfect, untainted.
Right, and so you end up grieving this flawless possibility.
Exactly. It's like mourning a ghost.
Yeah. Mahmoud shares some stories in the book that really illustrate this.
Oh, yeah. What kind of stories?
Well, there's this woman, Sarah, and she had this crush on her coworker, Jake.
Okay, classic office crush.
Right, and they would have these friendly chats in the break room.
Yeah, yeah.
And it led her to imagine this whole romantic relationship.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. And then he starts dating someone else.
Oof.
And she's heartbroken,
Yeah.
even though they were never actually a couple.
Right, but in her mind, they were.
Exactly.
It's a real thing.
It is.
Like I said, our inner world, it's just as powerful as what's happening on the outside.
Absolutely. And then there's David, who had this online connection with Emily.
Okay, so this is like a modern day love story.
Yeah, totally. And they would message every day,
Yeah.
have these late night chats.
Uh-huh.
And he was convinced that this was going somewhere romantic.
Right, building that connection.
And then Emily's like, oh, no, I just see you as a friend.
Oh, friend zone.
Yeah, and he was devastated,
Ouch. Yeah, that's rough.
even though they'd never even met in person.
Right, but that online connection can feel so real.
Totally.
And when it doesn't translate into the real world, it's a letdown.
Yeah, and I think these stories show that it's so important to embrace that vulnerability,
I agree.
that having these feelings, even for someone you never dated,
Yeah.
it's not a weakness. It's actually an indication that you're capable of love and connection.
You're a feeling human being, that's all. And that's a good thing.
It is. And I think Mahmoud really nails it when he says
Yeah.
that acknowledging these feelings without judging yourself
Yes.
is the first step in healing.
You have to give yourself permission to feel.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly telling yourself you shouldn't be upset, you're
Yeah.
just going to bottle it up and it'll come out in other ways.
Exactly. And you have to recognize that grieving this loss is a legitimate experience.
Absolutely.
And that allows you to start processing it in a healthy way.
Right. It's like acknowledging the wound so it can start to heal.
Totally.
Okay, so first step, acknowledge and validate those feelings.
Yes, don't minimize them
No, honor your experience.
and allow yourself time.
Yeah.
Don't rush to distract yourself.
Right. Let yourself feel it.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's next?
Okay, so now let's talk about the fantasy versus the reality,
Okay, let's unpack that.
because this is where I think our minds can really play tricks on us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's so easy to create these idealized versions of people in our heads.
Especially when you haven't really interacted with them that much.
Right, or you only see them in certain contexts.
Yeah, like at work or online.
Exactly.
And all you see are the good bits.
Right, you only see the highlight reel.
Exactly. It's like watching a carefully curated Instagram feed,
Yes, that's a perfect analogy.
you know, where everything looks perfect and airbrushed.
Right.
But real life isn't like that.
No.
And real people definitely aren't like that.
And you know, Mahmoud poses these really interesting questions in the book.
Okay, like what?
Like, have you ever found yourself thinking, this person is perfect? Have you ignored red flags or inconsistencies?
Oh, yeah, we've all done that.
Or made excuses for their lack of effort?
Oh, 100%.
These are all signs that maybe you're relating more to the fantasy than the reality.
You're falling in love with the idea of them
Yes.
rather than the actual person.
Right. And the danger is that you invest so much in this, what could have been.
Oh, yeah. You get stuck in potential.
Right. And it keeps you from seeing and pursuing real possibilities.
It's like you're living in a parallel universe.
Yeah. And this reminds me of one of Mahmoud's stories about Lisa.
Okay, tell me about Lisa.
So Lisa had this huge admiration for Tom,
Uh-huh.
but it was all from afar.
Okay.
They had very limited interactions.
Right.
But in her head, she'd built up this elaborate fantasy.
Like their perfect life together.
Right.
Oh, I know that feeling.
And then they finally have a real conversation.
Uh-oh.
And she realizes they're completely incompatible.
Oh, that's gotta be disappointing.
All right, the person she'd been longing for was basically a figment of her imagination.
Yeah, it's like the bubble bursts.
Yeah, and then there's Mark and Rachel.
Okay, what happened with them?
They had this amazing chemistry,
Uh-huh.
lots of flirting.
Okay.
And Mark was convinced she was the one.
Oh, boy.
But she wasn't fully reciprocating.
Oh.
Like, she wasn't as invested.
Right.
And then she starts dating someone else.
Oof.
And he was crushed.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing the potential that he'd imagined.
That's a tough one.
It is. And I think these stories show how important it is to separate the fantasy from reality.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, first you got to do a reality check.
Okay.
And this might be a little painful.
Yeah. Honesty often is.
But you have to compare your thoughts and feelings about this person
Yeah.
to your actual interactions.
Right, like what actually happened.
Yeah, like were those moments really as perfect as you remember?
It's so easy to romanticize the past.
It is, and then you have to resist the urge to romanticize the unknown.
Yeah.
Like if they didn't pursue a relationship,
Right.
there's a reason,
There's always a reason.
even if you don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Don't fill in the blanks with wishful thinking.
It's like creating your own heartbreak.
And then finally, just stay present.
Okay.
Focus on your life right now,
Yeah.
not the potential future that never happened.
Live in the now.
Exactly.
I like that.
It's about grounding yourself in reality.
Right. Bring yourself back to earth.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about acknowledging those feelings.
Yeah.
And dismantling the fantasy.
Right.
What's next?
Okay, so now we need to talk about those thought patterns.
Okay.
That can really keep us stuck.
Oh, yeah, those thought loops.
Because our minds tend to replay memories and imagined scenarios.
All right, like a broken record.
Yeah, especially when there's no formal beginning or end to something.
Yeah, it's like your brain is searching for closure.
Right, but it just keeps spinning.
And it can drive you crazy.
Totally. And what Mahmoud points out is that often
Yeah.
the attachment isn't even really to the person.
It's to the idea of them.
Yeah, to what they represent.
To the potential.
Yeah, like a symbol of something.
Yeah, like maybe they represent excitement or validation.
Right, or a sense of possibility.
Exactly.
And recognizing that can be really helpful.
It can help you detach a little bit.
Right, because it's not really about them, it's about what they symbolize to you.
Exactly.
And Mahmoud actually outlines some common obsessive thought patterns.
Oh, I'm sure we can all relate to this.
Right, so there's the what-if scenarios.
Yeah, the endless what-ifs.
Right, what if I said this? What if I'd done that?
It's a rabbit hole.
And then there's idealization.
Right, where you focus only on the good.
Right, and then you start comparing this imaginary relationship
Oh, yeah.
to other potential partners.
Which is never fair.
No, because you're comparing real people to a fantasy.
Exact.
And then, of course, replaying past interactions.
Oh, yeah, analyzing every word and gesture.
Over and over again?
Like you're trying to find a hidden message.
Yeah, and then there's the social media stalking.
Oh, yeah, I forget that.
Right, constantly checking their profile.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
It keeps you stuck.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the story of Maria.
Okay, who's Maria?
So Maria had a crush on her coworker, Alex, for over a year.
Oh, boy. Another office crush.
Yeah, and in her mind, they had this special connection.
Mm-hmm.
She would replay interactions, looking for signs.
So I'm searching for clues.
And then she sees on social media that he's in a relationship.
Oh, no.
And it just triggers this flood of what-if thoughts.
Yeah.
And she can't stop checking his social media.
It's like a compulsion.
It is. It's like your brain needs to know.
Yeah, but it just makes it worse.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Mahmoud also points out that certain triggers can bring those feelings back.
Oh, yeah. Triggers are powerful.
Like seeing the person, hearing a song, a place.
Yeah, or even just their name.
Right.
It can all bring it flooding back.
Yeah. It's like your brain remembers the good feelings.
Right, and wants more.
Exactly. So what can you do to break free from those thought patterns?
Okay, let's get practical.
Moeed suggests doing reality checks.
Okay.
Ask yourself those tough questions.
Like what?
Was this person really as perfect as you remember?
Uh-huh.
Can you list their flaws?
Right, because no one's perfect.
How did their actions match up to your expectations?
Okay, yeah.
It's about being brutally honest with yourself.
It's about popping that fantasy bubble.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Mindfulness and grounding techniques can be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Like focusing on your breath.
Right, deep breaths.
Or the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It helps bring you back to the present moment.
Right, get out of your head.
Yeah. And sometimes you might need to limit exposure to triggers.
Yeah.
Like unfollow them on social media.
I know that's hard.
It is, but it can make a big difference.
It can.
And avoiding those places that trigger memories.
Right.
Deleting old messages and photos.
It's like a digital detox.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
And journaling can be really powerful.
Oh, yeah, journaling is amazing.
Mahmoud suggests asking yourself questions like,
Okay.
what am I really missing in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Am I making assumptions?
Yeah, we all do that.
How do I want to feel?
Right, what's your ideal state?
And what lessons can I take from this?
It's all about learning and growing.
Exactly. And he even shares the example of John.
Okay, what did John do?
John was really infatuated with this woman, Emily.
Uh-huh.
They went on a few casual dates,
Okay.
but it never went anywhere.
Right.
And he was really struggling to let go.
Yeah, I get it.
So he started journaling.
Okay.
And he even wrote a goodbye letter to her.
But he didn't send it?
No, he didn't send it,
Okay.
but it helped him to process his feelings.
Right, it gave him a sense of closure.
Yeah, and it helped him realize He was more attached to the idea of her than the actual person.
That's a good distinction.
Yeah.
It's like you said, sometimes it's not even about them, it's about what they represent.
Right. And Mahmoud also talks about emotional attachment and projection.
Okay, so what's that all about?
Sometimes our feelings aren't really about the individual.
It's about what they represent to us.
Yeah, like a need for security, excitement, validation.
Right. We're projecting our own needs onto them.
Exactly. And recognizing that can be really freeing.
It can help you break the cycle.
Yeah, because then you can start looking for healthier ways to meet those needs.
Right, on your own terms.
Exactly. So it's really about shifting the focus back to yourself.
Okay.
Find activities that bring you joy,
Yeah.
reconnect with friends and family,
Right. Build your support system.
and be kind to yourself.
Self-compassion is key.
It is. So that's all about breaking those thought patterns.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
And creating that sense of self-awareness.
Right. Knowing yourself better.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the next step?
Well, once you have that awareness,
Yeah.
it's time to create some distance.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It's so important to break that cycle of rumination and idealization.
Because if you're constantly bombarded with reminders,
Right.
it's hard to move on.
Exactly. And Mahmoud gives some practical advice on how to create that distance.
Okay, I'm listening.
So limiting or even ceasing contact can be really important,
Yeah.
even if you were just friends.
Yeah, because that can keep you emotionally entangled.
Right. It keeps that connection alive.
And those social media boundaries are key.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Unfollowing, muting, or even taking a break from social media altogether.
Yeah. It's about creating digital distance.
And sometimes it means avoiding physical places, too.
Right. Those places that hold memories.
Yeah, the spots that trigger you.
And sometimes you might even need to change your routines.
Right. Shake things up a bit.
Yeah. Create a life that doesn't revolve around them.
It's about taking back your power.
Exactly. And Mahmoud acknowledges that this can be really tough.
It is.
It can bring up feelings of loss.
Yeah, even though the relationship wasn't real.
Right, but it was real to you. But he emphasizes that this distance is necessary for healing.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid.
It is.
It hurts at first, but then it starts to heal.
Yeah, and he shares this great example of Jessica.
Okay, tell me about Jessica.
So she met this guy online.
Uh-huh.
They had this instant connection,
Okay.
but it never went beyond that initial stage.
Right.
They never actually dated,
Okay.
but they interacted a lot online,
Uh-huh.
and she was having a really hard time moving on.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tough.
So she finally unfollowed him on social media
Okay.
and started focusing on her offline life.
Good for her.
And it made a huge difference.
Yeah, she created that space.
Yeah, she reduced the rumination and the emotional investment.
It's like breaking free from a spell.
And I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that setting boundaries with mutual friends is a part of this too.
Oh, yeah, good point.
It's okay to politely say, I'd rather not hear updates about them.
Yeah, you don't need constant reminders.
Right. It's about protecting yourself.
Exactly. And Mahmoud really frames this as self-care.
It is prioritizing your well-being.
Absolutely.
He even uses the term emotional detox.
I love that.
It's about limiting exposure to anything related to them.
Right, giving yourself a clean break.
Yeah, so you can heal.
It makes sense.
So we've talked about acknowledging your feelings, dismantling the fantasy, creating space and distance.
Yeah.
What's next?
Okay, so now we need to talk about challenging your assumptions.
Okay.
And this is where self-rediscovery comes in.
I love that self-rediscovery.
Because when you've been so focused on someone else,
Right.
even in your imagination,
Yeah.
you can lose touch with yourself.
You can forget who you are outside of that fantasy.
Exactly. And so this stage is all about reconnecting with yourself.
Okay, how do we do that?
Mahmoud emphasizes rebuilding your identity beyond those romantic fantasies
Yeah.
by asking yourself some really important questions.
Okay, like what?
What are your personal goals outside of relationships?
What hobbies and passions bring you joy?
Right. What lights you up?
Exactly. And who are you when you're not focused on someone else?
It's about rediscovering your essence.
It is. And he shares the example of Sarah.
Oh, yeah. Sarah from The Office crush.
Yeah, she was so entangled with Jake for 2 years.
Even though they never dated.
Right.
Yeah,
And she realized she'd lost touch with herself.
it happens.
So she went back to her old hobbies,
Like what?
painting and running,
Okay, nice.
and she reconnected with her friends.
Good for her.
And she started to feel more fulfilled and independent.
It's like she reclaimed her life.
Yeah. And so Mahmoud suggests seeking out new sources of joy,
Okay.
like trying new hobbies,
Yeah, step outside your comfort zone.
maybe dance classes, music lessons, anything creative.
Right. Explore your options.
Expand your social circle.
Okay.
Make new friends, join groups, go to events,
Yeah, connect with people.
and prioritize personal development.
Right, invest in yourself.
Take courses, pursue your career goals, read self-improvement books.
It's all about growth.
It is, and he shares another story about Mark.
Okay, what happened with Mark?
He was imagining a future with his coworker,
Uh-huh.
but she got engaged to someone else.
Ouch.
Yeah, and instead of wallowing,
Yeah,
he used it as a turning point.
good for him.
He took a language class and started volunteering,
Wow, that's awesome.
and it opened him up to new interests and people.
It's like turning a negative into a positive.
Exactly. And Mahmoud emphasizes embracing a growth mindset,
Oh, okay, I like that.
seeing these challenges as learning opportunities.
Wait, not as failures.
Yeah, reflect on the lessons you've learned,
Uh-huh.
practice gratitude,
Okay.
and look forward to the future with new goals.
It's about shifting your perspective.
It is. It's about recognizing that you have so much potential.
You're not defined by this experience.
Exactly. You're so much more than that.
Okay, so we've challenged our assumptions, we've rediscovered ourselves.
Right.
What's next on this journey?
Okay. So now it's time to move forward with intention.
I like that, with intention.
Because you've done all this work,
Right.
you've learned so much about yourself.
Yeah.
Now it's time to apply that to your future.
Okay, how do we do that?
Mahmoud emphasizes approaching new connections with awareness.
Right, not just jumping into anything.
Yeah, no more rushing into things out of loneliness or a need for validation.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Right. It's about being deliberate.
Okay.
And so he talks about defining your personal values and needs in a relationship.
Yeah, that's so important.
What's truly important to you?
Right, what are your non-negotiables?
What are your deal breakers?
Exactly, because if you know what you want,
Right.
you're less likely to settle for less.
Totally. And recognizing those red flags early on.
Oh, yeah, those are crucial.
Trusting your intuition.
Don't ignore those gut feelings.
Yeah. And building a strong foundation of self-love and independence
That's so important.
before entering a new relationship.
Because if you're not whole on your own, you're going to be looking for someone else to complete you.
Yeah. And that's never a good foundation.
It's a recipe for codependency.
Exactly. And then setting realistic expectations for new connections.
Right, no more putting people on pedestals.
Yeah. No more instant idealization.
And just be present in those new interactions.
You're right. Be mindful.
Get to know them for who they really are.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to communicate openly and honestly.
Communication is key.
It is. So you've done all this work. You're moving forward with intention.
Uh-huh.
But there's still this feeling that romantic love is the only valid form of love.
Right, like that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and that's where Mahmoud reminds us that there are so many other types of love.
Oh yeah, love comes in many forms.
And they're all important.
Absolutely, and they can all bring you joy.
So let's break it down.
Okay, I'm ready.
So there's platonic love.
Yeah, the love between friends.
Right, it's that emotional support and connection without the romance.
Yeah, and that can be so powerful.
It can-
Like in the book, there's Sarah, who leans on her friend Emily
Right.
after the whole Jake thing didn't work out.
Yeah, she found comfort and support in that friendship.
It filled that void.
And then there's familial love.
The love of family.
Right, it's that sense of security and belonging.
Yeah, unconditional love.
And in the book, John finds support from his sister Claire
Oh, that's sweet.
when he's struggling with unrequited love.
Family can be amazing.
They can. And then, of course, self-love.
Yeah, that's the foundation.
It's the most important love of all.
Because if you don't love yourself,
Right.
you can't expect